Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports, and I'm really excited for this video, and it's one that has been highly requested on the channel. If you have any other video ideas, make sure to go ahead and put them in the comment section right now. I would love to try and record some of the things you guys are specifically looking for. But this video, as you can see from the thumbnail, title, and also the opening graphic here, we're going to revisit my 2021 NBA draft big board and look back at, what did I do well? What did I, hit the nail on the head with? Did I miss on any prospects? And just kind of, give my reaffirmations for a lot of these players on where I had them and why, and if I still feel that same way or not. Obviously, a lot has changed within a year, so we're getting close to the 2022 NBA draft. If you are a fan of other NBA draft content, make sure to subscribe to the channel and also leave a like on today's video for more. And then let's talk about this video preview. Exactly what are we going to talk about? My biggest hit outside of the lottery. So there's one player that I pinpointed that I thought was going to be a really good grab. I actually had a first round grade on him while everyone else seemingly placed him as a second round worthy selection. I feel really good about that one. My biggest miss, and the one thing here for me, I feel like I always have one yikes per draft where I misevaluate one guy just a little bit. And for example, in the past, a guy that I really missed on was Trae Young. For the most part, I do feel like I do a great job. I feel like I am actually fairly accurate and precise. But there's always one prospect I feel like that either, I over evaluate and say maybe this guy doesn't do as well because of certain issues. But at the same time, there's also elements where maybe I say a guy's going to be better than he actually ends up being. So we'll see exactly what my biggest miss was in the 2021 NBA draft. And then my top 12. I was going to just do a top 10, but I actually wanted to include players 11 and 12 because I think they're interesting players that, again, I was higher on in comparison to consensus, and I feel really good about that. So I wanted to include them as well in this video. And now let's get to my biggest hit here. And you can see I had him ranked 26th, which almost feels low right now because of how well he played. Obviously was a second team all rookie selection. Part of that, though, is he, was a senior coming out of Alabama. He was a little bit older. So for me, I'm not necessarily worried about where I had him ranked. I'm just proud that I had him as a first round level player in this class because he did go in the second round. Most people and most evaluators looked at him as a second round worthy selection. I thought he was worthy to go in the first round. I would have taken him in the first round. So let's read exactly what I wrote about him. Small ball 5 who can play into a variety of roles, fits as a perimeter defender that can bother some guards and a lot of wings with great all caps there length, but is definitely strong enough to defend threes and fours while also switching on to fives occasionally. Combination of length, strength, and size playing to his defensive capabilities as he moves his feet well, and is willing and capable to challenge shots on all three levels. I really love that I wrote that part in there because we've seen how many three-point shots he's blocked this year, which is a really rare skill to have at the NBA level. And it goes to show how well I evaluated him with his actual defensive talents. Point forward to run sets through occasionally, mostly as a player who's going to be able to make the right read is what I was hitting on there. I think there's still room for him to grow into that. He didn't show that as much with New Orleans. Of course, there's a lot of ball dominant players there already, McCollum and Brandon Ingram specifically. Not a natural scoring option, but will play off the ball well into a role and can function as a corner shooter early in his career. I was a little shaky on this one. I thought that his corner shooting was going to be able to grow just because it's a shorter three-point line, but he actually hit some big shots from the wing and from the top of the key this year as well. So I think maybe he's really progressed already a lot. Summer League, he struggled in that regard. And then I think pretty quickly into his career and the time between Summer League and the actual season did improve his three-point shooting. And then I think I nailed it here at the end here. IQ plays a big role into his fifth on contenders immediately in year one. We saw how much of an impact he had for the Pelicans as a rookie. I think Herb Jones is going to have a nice 10 to 15 year career. I think I absolutely nailed it. I would say this is my biggest hit outside of the lottery players. And I feel really, really good about this one. At 27, though, this is my biggest miss. I had Franz Wagner all the way down at 27. And for anyone who's been watching the channel, I tend to not work off consensus. Yes, Franz Wagner was typically looked at as a top 10 player in the class, along with a whole bunch of other players. And when I don't agree, I just simply do not agree. So for Franz Wagner, I didn't agree, and I think I really sold short his athleticism. I think that's really the one thing I was looking past, and his size at the position. What you can see here is I wrote smart player that finds himself well positioned often, catch and shoot guy, quality playmaker as a 3-4 skilled all-around player, technically sound. So again, a little bit shorter of a profile here than what I wrote about Herb Jones. I had watched Franz Wagner plenty, and I knew he was a solid player. I just thought that being solid at a bunch of things, I thought in the NBA doesn't typically make you a really good player. I would have liked to see him a little bit more skilled in one area, but that's where I think me underselling his athleticism and size did hurt me, because clearly he's a top 10 player from this class. I really was wrong about Franz Wagner here. Definitely my biggest miss. Part of this too is he had a really good opportunity in Orlando to showcase what he can do. Had the ball in his hands more. Had he gone to a different team, maybe he wouldn't have had the ball as much, maybe played into a smaller role. And I still don't think his upside's as high as some of the other guys that went in the top 10, but ultimately Franz Wagner definitely was a miss here at 27. Lowest I probably should have had him was right around that 11-12 mark, but I'm sure he's probably going to end up being a top 10 player from this class. So definitely my one big yikes from this draft was Franz Wagner. Then at 12, we'll get into the top 12 here now. Nah'Shon Hyland out of VCU. I loved this kid. Remember, this kid went in the 20s to the Denver Nuggets. Tim Connolly, one of the best talent evaluators in the entire league. Right now, there's some drama, whether he could go to Minnesota for that president role or not. We'll see, but I think that's going to be a huge storyline to follow, actually, because if he does, Minnesota is getting a really, really good person to add into their front office. And I think he really, really nailed it here with a Nah'Shon Hyland selection as well. Let's take a look now at what I specifically said about Hyland. Coming out of VCU, talented perimeter scoring guard with elite range, comfortable pulling up from 35 to 40 feet. Didn't necessarily shoot that distance frequently in the NBA, but did shoot multiple feet behind the NBA three-point line with regularity, and knocked it down with pretty good consistency this year. And provides good size as a combo guard at 6'5". That's what we saw as well from Denver. With the absence of Jamal Murray, I think Hyland had a bigger role, which I think was really good for the beginning part of his career to showcase what he's capable of. I think this was a phenomenal find again from Denver. Lanky, thin with defensive limitations physically, but IQ helps compensate, as well as good timing with quick hands. Specifically will be a nice offensive addition to a lot of teams. Can handle in the pick and roll while also being a complementary scorer in the half court. This is why I was really high on that selection for Denver last year, because I think he fits whether Murray's off the floor or on it. But with Murray's absence, I think he just had a bigger role this year, which is really good to showcase some of his talent. And I think Hyland's going to be a mainstay there in Denver for the next 5 to 10 years. Connolly, again, I'm going to sing his praises a little bit. I think he's done a phenomenal job with that Nuggets team. Jokic obviously gets a ton of credit, but even drafting Jamal Murray where he took him outside the top 5 was a really good pickup. Michael Porter Jr. took a big risk there with the injuries. We'll see how that all plays out, but I think Nah'Shon Hyland, another great example here of a really good find for Tim Connolly in that Nuggets front office. 11, I had Isaiah Jackson, which again, this was a player that a lot of people looked at near 15 to 20. He went to the Pacers closer to the end of the first round than the lottery. And for me with Isaiah Jackson coming out of Kentucky, you see what I nailed it here on. Phenomenal timing as a shot blocker. He was actually one of the league leaders when it comes to shot blocks per minute. He only played about 15 minutes a game. We'll talk about why a little bit later on. Good rim runner, screen and roll, big man, good athlete, mix of quickness and verticality. Great understanding of help side timing, best shot blocker in the class, but will find himself in foul trouble often, which is partially what limited his minutes. And then also just a young guy playing for the Indiana Pacers with Rick Carlisle as the coach. Carlisle tends to have a shorter leash with rookies. Last year in Dallas, didn't really play Josh Green too much. And then this year, with the Pacers, obviously Duarte during his minutes and also Isaiah Jackson. But I think down the stretch of the year, Isaiah Jackson showed what he was capable of. Decent passer and can maybe pass out of high post occasionally. Solid hands, quick second jump, which I think is a huge point of emphasis for me here. Slightly better defensively out in space than most traditional bigs, which is why I had him at 11. I think there's a little bit more switchability you can play into, but I also think he's very good in drop coverage, and I feel really good about having Isaiah Jackson at 11. Alperen Sengun here, who obviously came from the Turkish Super League. Not very often we get a player coming from there, and I actually had him in my top 10. I thought he was a really nice pickup for the Rockets. Talented big man with top footwork in the class out of the post. It's really rare now. You see someone who's actually a talented back to the basket big coming into the NBA draft in the lottery. Obviously did not go in the lottery, but I had him as a lottery grade in this class. Variety of drop steps, up and unders. Obviously a little bit of a typo there. Cross key hooks, etc. Good handle for his size and great feel as a passer. That's something I think we got to see a little bit this year for Houston. Can impact game in a variety of ways and has the requisite athleticism to play in the league. One thing that I wish I had touched on here more was his ability to box out. I thought that was a key point as well. I clearly did not talk about that in this profile. But I did feel like Sengun was going to bring a decent level of physicality, which we don't typically see from a lot of international big men. Usually the MO on them is that they're a little bit softer, tend to be more skill oriented. And obviously Sengun very much is skill oriented, but I think he also can bang down low with the best of them. So Sengun, I think there's still a lot of potential for him to unlock. I feel pretty solid about Sengun at 10. I think obviously Franz Wagner would have jumped him here, but ultimately I do feel good about it. Josh Giddey at 9. And for anyone who was watching the channel early last year, if you've been with us from the start, you know I was super high on Josh Giddey. I actually moved him down my board a little bit near the end of the process. I believe I had him up to 7 and then pulled him down just a little bit. I had a couple concerns come up for me, but overall I was higher on Giddey than most. And what I wrote here, smart player capable of running an NBA offense, great size at 6'8", plays at his own pace, very good offensively in the pick and roll, which I think, Thunder fans, they can really attest to that. Will not function well off the ball. Lower tier athlete, but very skilled, quick moves to make up for the lack of speed, which I'm sure, again, Thunder fans saw quite a bit of this year. Played very well on a professional stage in the NBL, which I think is now the second best league in the world, and affects game in multiple areas. Extremely talented passer with a slower jump shot release. And I think for me, yes, Giddey had a phenomenal rookie season, around 12, 7, and 7, and was very impactful for a Thunder team that, obviously shut him down toward the end of the season. We didn't get to see him toward the end of the year, but Giddey, I was really high on him. And obviously the viral video went out basically saying his weakness was basketball on draft night after all the weaknesses that got listed for him. But I think there's this element about cerebral players who are just really smart, understand the game of basketball. They tend to get slept on at times. And Josh Giddey, he went 6th overall. Sam Presti pulled the trigger on it, even above Jonathan Kuminga. And I didn't think it was a terrible pick. I was surprised they didn't take Kuminga, just given Sam Presti's draft history. But Giddey, definitely a good pickup. Has the best haircut in the NBA, by the way. Maybe I should have given him a little bit more of a bonus for that. His hair definitely is wicked, but so is his passing, and so are some of the other things he can do. I think if we're going to see him become an all-star level player, he's going to have to get better as a shooter. I don't know if that's going to be in the cards for him, but ultimately he's going to be a good starter in the league for quite some time, as long as he keeps playing the way he has been. Continuing on to who I had at 8 now, and I had Davion Mitchell here. And Davion Mitchell was one of the, I think, more divisive players in last year's class, because simply his size turned off some evaluators to him for sure. But at the same time, all the skills are there. Specifically with some of the things I mentioned in this profile, I think I did a really good job on hitting on everything that I thought Davion Mitchell could become. Quick, decisive guard, able to put the ball in the hole off the bounce. Top perimeter defender in the class, so I was very high on his defensive capabilities. Took and made tough threes his final season at Baylor. Good in the pick and roll offensively. And what you're going to notice here is with some of these top guys, the guys I watched the most, I actually wrote probably the least amount on, because this is also a guide for me to kind of look back on at times when I was, recording videos last year. And I had watched Davion Mitchell so much, I knew everything I needed to know. He had quick hands, quick feet, really smart defensively as well. Could get through screens on that end of the floor, and used his chest well. Even though he's undersized, he plays way bigger than he is. And I think we saw it this year. Davion Mitchell, toward the beginning of the year, I think a lot of people started to fall in love with him because of how good he was defensively. And then once the Tyrese Halliburton trade went down, we saw a bigger role here for Davion Mitchell. He had multiple 20-point performances in his last 15 games. And I think, looking at his time in college as well, it took him a little bit of time to figure out the college game. I think he's a little bit of a slower grower, slower learner, but once he picks onto stuff, he does a really good job. So yes, I had Mitchell above Giddey. Giddey played much better his rookie season, in my opinion, than Davion Mitchell, but I wouldn't discount Davion Mitchell here. I would maybe switch the two. Again, I was really high on Josh Giddey the entire process, and then fell out of favor with him just a tiny bit toward the end. The whole time I was saying he was a lottery pick even before anyone else was. But me with Davion Mitchell here as well, I do really still like this kid. I think he's going to be good. We're going to see how Sacramento goes about building this team now that they're at pick 4. If they draft another guard, maybe we see Davion Mitchell not take a step forward. So it's possible here that he maybe gets stuck behind guys for part of his career. But ultimately, I think Davion Mitchell at 8, fairly well warranted. Again, Franz Wagner probably jumps ahead of him here. But for the most part, I think I was kind of right on it here with Davion Mitchell, specifically with what I wrote. At 7, James Bouknight, and another player who he ascended into where I had Josh Giddey. For most of the process, I was not super high on James Bouknight. But then we got closer and closer. And I kept watching more and more of him, and something clicked in my head about his ability to score at all 3 levels, specifically off the bounce. And then at that point, I had fallen in love and moved him up into my top 7. And you can see what I wrote here. Athletic 2-guard with creation potential in the half court, strong finisher around the rim through contact, and comfortable playing off the ball as a cutter, which I thought was a really great add point here for Charlotte once they drafted him. Adjusts well when attacking rim, smooth handle, technically sound shot mechanics, just needs to get more reps as a catch and shoot weapon. Scoring upside propels him into the top 10. You can see there, I use the word propels because for me, I had him outside the top 10. And then the more and more I watched him, the more and more I, counter compared him to others in the class, I started to like him more and more. And I think even though he had very limited play time this year, only 31 games played for Charlotte, very limited minutes. Obviously, that team was trying to make the playoffs. So playing rookies tends to not get you where you want to go if the playoffs is your destination. But I think Bouknight is ready for a massive step forward in year 2. Miles Bridges is headed toward free agency, so we'll see what Charlotte does with that. Gordon Hayward could potentially be on the trade block as well. So there might be massive minutes opening up here for Bouknight. But at the same time, I just think the talent's there. We're going to see him take a massive step forward in year 2. And I don't feel bad about this one. I feel pretty good about him still at this point, just because, the eye test to me does matter. And I think when you actually watch this kid, the talent's there. It's just about the role that he's going to be put in. And I think next to LaMelo Ball, that cutting action and everything we can see him do specifically as a mid-range and score at the rim, he's going to shine in a lot of different ways. So don't sell your James Bouknight stock. To me, I still think he's warranting being a top 10 player in this class. 6, Jonathan Kuminga here. Of course, we saw him not get drafted 6th overall, but throughout the process, I was really high on Kuminga as well. Last year, I really loved last year's draft class, and I think the top 12 here has exhibited why. There's a lot of really good talent in this class. Last year, everyone was saying, oh, it's a 3-player class with, or 4-player class if you included Suggs. And right now we've gone through a bunch of players that are really, really talented and really good. And I think this is a really healthy exercise to look at for classes in general to see how talented some classes are. Kuminga at 6 here, again, this is a really nice value pick in terms of where Golden State got him, because he's had a really nice, impactful season for them. Great size and length as a wing. Throughout the process, I continuously compared him to Paul George, which was very high praise, and a lot of people did not look at him that way. Athletic semblance of back to the basket post game, which I like for him offensively. Good strength, high defensive upside, which I think's really played himself into minutes for Golden State this year. Shot creation potential, good passing vision, needs to make quicker decisions though. Specifically, I labeled him as a scorer here. I think he fell in love with putting the ball on the deck a little bit too much and not, just going toward the rack and using some of his physicality to his advantage. But ultimately here for me with Kuminga, I had likened him to Paul George. And I think he's someone who's going to grow into that. Per 36, he was nearly averaging 20 points a game per 36 minutes. So for me, if Jonathan Kuminga can get more run, and playing into Golden State's offense is really tough to do because it's a very high IQ oriented offense. And I think Kuminga wasn't necessarily ready for that right away at the start of his career. Defensively, we know what he's capable of. I think he's still learning the game offensively a little bit. But for me, Kuminga, a very special talent, and I feel really good about having him at 6. And then at 5, I had Jalen Suggs, and this is where this is one good reason to subscribe to the channel. I do not go off of consensus. Everyone had Suggs in the top 4. I did not. I still think Suggs is a good player, and again, I'm going to warn you not to sell your Suggs stock. I still think that there's a lot that he can unlock in his game. He only shot 36% from the field this year, dealt with injuries, missed quite a bit of time, and did struggle. Did not make an all-rookie team this year. So definitely a little bit of a concern here for a player who was drafted in the top 5, but he's a very quick player with point guard type of vision, but he probably plays more as a combo guard, elite slasher, adjustments midair, tough defender as well, which is something I really liked about him. He's got quick feet, good hands in the passing lane, quality handles, and he was one of the best transition players in the draft last year. I had looked at him kind of as a Drew Holiday, which I still think is attainable. Yes, he had a terrible rookie season for what we were expecting, but he was also playing on a really bad Orlando team, not a ton of other talent around him. And I think give him a little bit of time here. He's a great athlete, was a high school quarterback, could have went to any college to play QB. Ended up going to Gonzaga to play basketball, was phenomenal at that. Obviously, Gonzaga almost won a national title with him his freshman season. And I still think Suggs is a player who down the road, we're going to see massive improvements from. And I think once he adjusts to the NBA game, is still going to be a very good player. At 4, Scottie Barnes. And this is one of those where everyone was telling me that I was wrong about this. I gave the Raptors an A+ for drafting Scottie Barnes 4th overall over Jalen Suggs. And you can go back and watch that video. If you go to our channel and scroll quite a bit to last July, when the Raptors drafted him, I gave him an A+ for that. And a lot of the comments told me that I was wrong about that, or that they were hoping I was right because everyone wanted Suggs there. Scottie Barnes, and look at what I wrote: elite defensive presence, can guard 1 through 4, great size and elite length, great passing vision for his size, will function as a point forward and defensive stopper at the next level, phenomenal in transition. I was so high on this kid. I thought this kid was phenomenal, and a lot of people, looked at Scottie Barnes and said, well, maybe he goes 5th to Orlando and, they develop him a little bit. This kid averaged 15 points a game on nearly 50% shooting, and was at points of the season the Raptors' playmaker, their go-to guy. I think Scottie Barnes is such a special two-way player, and he's someone who, if he continues to get better and his shot develops at all, watch out, because he could take massive strides forward. I feel really good about having him at 4. Obviously, had such a great impactful season for Toronto. The one thing I'm going to say is the rookie season does not, designate who the best player in the class is. It really does not. So for me, Barnes, he's still got a lot of upside here and had a great rookie year, but I still think the 3 guys above him, I do feel good about the order I had them in. And at 3, I did have Evan Mobley here. Out of USC, again, as you see here what I wrote: length, defensive upside, deceptive athlete, touch, and floor spacer. I think the touch is the big thing, plus his coordination. I wish I had touched on that at that point. He's a very coordinated player for a big man, which is a tough thing to ask. His ability to catch lobs in traffic, that's something that's pretty rare, specifically at his length and size. He's got good fluidity to him. And I also think when you look at his long-term upside, we got to see him play a lot of the 4 this year, and he's great out on the perimeter defensively, but I also think he's got some real center qualities to him where he's gonna be able to protect the rim at an elite level. And Cleveland killed it with this pick. Again, I still think having him 3rd is fair, because I think 1 and 2 have higher offensive ceilings, but ultimately for me, Mobley, and this goes to show how great this class was, right? The top 4 are incredibly good, and then 5 through 12 have all been good. And then you even look at the Herb Jones and Franz Wagner's, who I had lower on my board, but still as first-round talents, they've been awesome as well. So this draft had a lot of really good talent in it. There's players in this draft that I haven't even mentioned yet that I think are going to have nice careers as well. Then we get to 2 here. Jalen Green obviously came from the G League Ignite route. He was the first player to get drafted out of the G League Ignite program, and it was a tough evaluation. He struggled at the start of the Elite Ignite season, but then toward the end really picked it up and had some phenomenal performances. And we saw the same thing from him this year in Houston, where beginning of the season he really struggled, but actually by the end of the year had very similar numbers to Cade Cunningham, who, Cade Cunningham got a lot more love than Jalen Green did this past year for sure. But Jalen Green, I still think, is a special long-term upside talent who is an elite athlete, has a really great first step, and is also someone who jumps out of the gym. And you can see what I wrote: uber athletic, underrated playmaker. I still think he's got to grow in that area a little bit, but he's shown flashes. He has an off-ball impact with his ability to cut. I think specifically in transition is probably what I was alluding to a lot here as well, with his ability to catch lobs around the rim in transition. Eerily similar to John Morant when it comes to a transition player. And then also I labeled him as an on-ball creator when going to his right, and I still think we have to see a little bit of improvement from him in that regard. He definitely did take steps forward this past year as a rookie for the Rockets. But if he gets a little bit more comfortable going to his left, he can be way better. I think Chet Holmgren actually has a similar issue right now, where Chet Holmgren is most comfortable dribbling right and then spinning back to his left hand. We'll see if he can fix that problem, but Jalen Green has taken massive steps forward, and I feel really good still about having him 2nd. And I want to know your thoughts on my big board up to this point, because you guys are all going to know who I had 1. I never wavered on it last year. Cade Cunningham, I always looked at him as the number 1 player. From the moment I first saw him play in high school, I evaluated him as the number 1 player in the class. I'm actually a high school coach myself. I feel like I can understand and evaluate high school players at a pretty decent rate. And for me, I knew Cade Cunningham was special the very first moment I saw him. He's got the all-around talent. He's got great footwork, size, plays at his own pace. He's got phenomenal vision. Being a 6'8" point guard, it puts you in a spot where you're going to succeed. And Detroit, they are so lucky they got the 1st overall pick, because it blesses you with a talent like Cade Cunningham. And throughout the process, I consistently compared him to Luka Doncic. I always, threw a little bit of caution to that and said, he's not going to be Luka. But if you're looking for somewhat of a Luka clone, you've got it here with Cade. He's a great all-around player. He plays the game the right way. He makes all the necessary passes. He's got a phenomenal array of passing angles that he can deliver passes to. He puts it in the shooting pocket, and he can also knock down the big shot when you need him to. And just like we saw at Oklahoma State, again, it took him a little bit of time to really come around in the college game and make his presence known. He did it again this year in the NBA. Struggled a little bit out of the gate, but by the start of the second month of the season, started to prove why he was worthy of the number 1 pick. I still think Cade Cunningham's the best player in this draft. I still think he's going to have the best career long term, but there are a ton of other great players as well. Hopefully you guys did enjoy today's video. If you did, leave a like and also subscribe. Thank you so much for watching again. Let me know your thoughts on my draft board. Obviously, the Franz Wagner miss hurts my credibility just a hair, but for the most part, I feel like I really evaluated these players well. Go check out some of our other videos. Again, thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the very next utility sports video.